the time for keynote speech. Now we are going to start the North and the South American edition. First of all, we like to have a keynote speech by inviting Dr. Livada and Deshpande Center Catalyst, MIT, and also Material Lab of MIT, and the Corporate Entrepreneurship Network co-founder. And furthermore, after the keynote speech of Dr. Livada, we are going to invite Mr. Shigeru Nakagawa from Blessing to talk about his initiative. Now, Dr. Livada, so you're ready, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Nagao. Can you hear me okay? Good. Let me share my screen here. How is that? You see it all right? Good, wonderful. Well, once again, thank you for the invitation to participate in your wonderful program here. My intent here today is to talk about my perception of what is going on in the innovation ecosystem, but really based on my experience with the Boston community and what I've observed over a very long number of years. I was very lucky to come to Boston as an undergraduate at MIT in the mid-60s. And then I stayed in the area since then. And as a result, I was able to be a participant in a very interesting development of what happened in the innovation community here in Boston. And it's been quite an interesting development. And let me show you a couple of photographs to start with, because when I arrived in Boston in the 60s, what I found was a very depressed economic situation. What is going on today is a very vibrant and growing economic situation. So I'm going to show you three pictures of the same area of the greater Boston area. It's actually the city of Cambridge across the river from Boston, in a location called Kendall Square. This first photograph is roughly 1935. The city of Boston is in the background here, and this is Kendall Square in the city of Cambridge across the river, but it's still the greater Boston area. And what's interesting about here is that this area here, Kendall Square, it was the heart of the Industrial Revolution in the United States. This is where most of the manufacturing facilities had started and grown. All these buildings that you see here were housing all sorts of companies. They were manufacturing anything from steel to rubber to clothing to tires to shoes, you name it. Very vibrant, and created a very rich economic base here in the Boston area, and up to 1935 or more. The next photograph that I want to show you is the same area, and this is a picture that was taken in 1979. But you would see the same visual from the early 60s to the mid 80s. This whole area here did not change at all. And what happened here is that by the mid 50s, the very successful manufacturing base of Boston had disappeared. It lost its competitiveness. All the businesses went out of business, and the buildings were abandoned and so on. And Boston was basically gripped in a very difficult economic situation. And so what happened was that the federal government, together with the city of Cambridge and MIT, put together a plan to revitalize the economy of the community here. And the plan was basically centered around this building here. This building here, Draper, it was one of the MIT labs that was built in the early 1960s. But this building here was built by the federal government, and the intent was to locate the research facility of NASA in 1962, to put it in Kendall Square. So that would supposedly create a vibrant new technology and economic base. Unfortunately, that plan never worked. And NASA, the research center of NASA was moved by President Johnson to Texas. And we were left with basically an open area with no buildings. These were dirt lots. Actually, my first job out of MIT was in this little building here in 1979, and I was looking across these empty lots with very, very little activity of any kind going on around here. And then I'll show you a photograph that's about 3 years old. It's not even up to date, but this is what Kendall Square looks like today. There's very little real estate left. Actually, the only parcel of real estate that is now being developed is the old building, the old NASA building that MIT has now taken over and is rebuilding that whole area. But over the years, Kendall Square has turned into the densest kind of 1.5 to 2 miles of technology. And it's all kinds of technologies. A good portion of it is pharmaceutical and biotech, but it's all kinds of technologies. It's startup companies, it's large companies, our research centers, and all adjacent to this area here, which is the MIT campus. So what happened? Well, what happened was that during the dark days of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, initially MIT began to spin out a lot of new companies. And there were a number of reasons for that. One of them was that there were a couple of areas at that time where technology was developing very rapidly. And those included computer science and microelectronics. But at the same time, the other thing that was working was that a lot of the student body and the graduates of MIT were very interested in staying in the area because it's a wonderful living community. Boston is a wonderful city and very close to a lot of to the ocean, to the mountains and stuff like that. Great area to live in. And a lot of the folks that were graduating from MIT decided that since there were no jobs to be had from a lot of other larger companies, they would start their own based on the technology that they were working with while being undergraduates and graduate students at MIT. And over the years, at the beginning, it went very slowly, but over the years, it really mushroomed. So a good friend of mine, Professor Ed Roberts at the Sloan School of Management at MIT, about 10 years ago, did an analysis of entrepreneurial activities at MIT and looked at 40 years of alumni and looked at the ones that started their own companies. And his assessment was that if you looked at the companies that were started by MIT alumni starting in the early 60s and for over the next 40 years, it basically created, on conservative estimates, the 17th largest economy in the world. if you wanted to be less conservative, some people argue that was 13th, but it doesn't matter. It was a very, very large undertaking, and just a few, data points. Close to 26,000 active companies. That doesn't include the companies that actually were set up and then disappeared. They were either acquired or failed or anything. 3.3 million employees, $2 trillion in revenues. It was the beginning of the turnaround for the local economy, and it was all based on innovation and entrepreneurship. And the ability of institutions like MIT originally, but not anymore, and even not for more than maybe 10 years, let's say, of spinning out interesting new things that are being developed in their research labs. Recent patterns that we are seeing today is the pace of startup and entrepreneurship, particularly from universities, is accelerating, actually. The age of founders is younger and younger. We are now talking about the average age of a founder is in the mid-20s. Many more women entrepreneurs and many more entrepreneurs that came to MIT and to the Boston area, to the universities and so on, from various parts of the world. Put all that together, that created a real dynamic. But again, it didn't happen overnight. It took roughly 30 years or more before we even realized what was going on. There's a pretty, funny story that in the mid-'80s, one of our governors ran for the presidency of the United States, and his motto for his campaign was the miracle of Massachusetts. And basically he was laughed at by most of the country and by a lot of people in Massachusetts that says there is no miracle in Massachusetts. But really, he knew better. There was, and there was a growing thing and a very dynamic thing. So what happened was in the 60s, we saw a big trend in computers and microelectronics. There's some names that you might recognize and some names that you probably wouldn't recognize, but in the microelectronics end of things, Thermo Electron, which is now Thermo Fisher, one of the largest, if not the largest, instrumentation company in the world. Analog Devices, EMC, which was then bought by Dell Computers, and so on. And the most important one, and the biggest one, but one that kind of, after 10 years, it flamed out, Digital Computer Corporation. Was one of the key drivers. In the 70s, though, the next wave of technology was really biopharma. And this came out of both MIT and Harvard, and actually created the biggest technology wave in Boston. It was the biggest one in the 70s and continues to be the biggest driver of technology and economic development. Kendall Square over the last 20 years has become the center of biopharma of the world. And there was nobody there at the time when I had my office in that building that I pointed out to you, but that whole empty area between that building and the Draper Labs is now full of pharmaceutical companies, from Novartis to Genzyme to Biogen, you name it. This was the big push here in Massachusetts, and continues to fuel our development. In the 2010, cleantech and sustainability technologies became really big, and I think that this will eventually be close to the size of what was going on in biotech here in the area, but we also have industrial technologies, robotics, and IoT. In the last, 3-4 years, we're seeing addition of a lot of activities in food, agriculture, and nutrition, and blue tech. We call it blue tech, but it's basically anything that has to do with water. Now, I got to make sure that you understand these were things that started, for example, in the 60s or 70s or the 90s, but continue today. None of them have stopped or anything like that. But this was what really fueled the activity here in the Boston area. And what we think that we've developed over the years is kind of a very interesting collaborative innovation ecosystem. And at the core of that ecosystem are the research centers. And by research centers today, at least in the United States, the primary research centers are the research universities. And in the case of Boston, also the research hospitals that we have here. This is where most of the new technology is being developed. 30 years ago, the core of basic research happened in corporate R&D labs. That is not the case anymore, as the large corporations, both in the US and to a somewhat similar degree in Europe. And I'm not sure that Japan is, the same case is for Japan. But the American corporations have cut back dramatically on basic research and are looking externally to the research universities and other research institutes to develop new technologies. And then they collaborate with those centers to bring those technologies to market or to partner in the development and so on. So what we have here at the core are research centers, the emerging companies, and the large global established companies learning how to really work together well. The other two components that are very critical, and I'll talk a little bit about it as well, is the infrastructure that's supporting this kind of activity, and a little bit about the capital, because really what really got the activity, the level of activity going in the mid to late 70s was the emergence of venture capital in Boston. Suddenly there was access to a significant amount of capital for these new companies to grow. But if you look at the technology research academic base of the area here, this has been traditionally and historically since the 50s the strength of the local community. We have an inordinately high number of research universities that are, of global quality. It's not just MIT and Harvard, but is the entire UMass system, Northeastern, Boston University, Tufts, and others. A very strong base of research hospitals that have been very active in spinning out new technologies, and a whole bunch of research centers, some of them affiliated with universities like the Broad Institute, that's a Harvard MIT Biotech Institute, and synthetic biology and so on. But we're basically the foundation of our wellness is the research that's happening in this area and the brain power that we have. And what's happened to the universities and the teaching hospitals in this period of time is that they've really have evolved, particularly the universities have evolved from being purely academic institutions to being a combination of teaching and spinning out new technologies and new companies and entrepreneurship. And that has also taken a long time to take effect, but has been a very powerful movement where if you look at student body, whether it's MIT or Harvard or whatever, at the very minimum, a quarter of the student body is actually involved in some sort of activity that has the potential of evolving into a spin-out from the university. So the base is academic, but then is supported now by a very, very strong presence from global companies. If you look 20 years ago in Boston, you wouldn't find these companies in the Boston area, but they've all established offices and activities here. We have a lot of innovation centers from various companies in a lot of different areas. And actually, one of the first ones that really created biotech, momentum that we had was when Novartis moved their research facilities from Switzerland to Cambridge. But a lot of the other ones, and this is just a short list, is not a complete list. We also have a good number of corporate venture capital groups that actively invest in these emerging technologies and startups. At the lower end here, I put a group that we have here that's called the Corporate Entrepreneurship Network. Is a network of folks from about 60 or 70 global companies that are actively spending time in the Boston area, many of them based here. And they are very, very, very active in developing strong partnerships with startups, making equity investment in startups, and also at the same time, also attracting talent from the local universities. So that is kind of the second component that's key to this collaboration model. The other one that's, to me, is very important is what I call the infrastructure. And what we've developed in the last 10 years here is a very unique combination of what I would probably about 5 what I would call super incubators. And these, as I said, they've emerged in the last 10 years, but one of the most interesting ones is an incubator called Greentown Labs. This is a cleantech incubator. It started in 2011 with 4 little companies, 4 startups that were looking for a place to get their work done, and they found a basement in a part of Boston. It was a really very pedestrian facility, very small, very uncomfortable. But 10 years later, it has evolved into the largest cleantech incubator, I think, in the entire world, definitely in North America. There is now a facility in one of the areas of Greater Boston called Somerville, over 100,000 square feet, close to 100,000 square feet, over 100 startups. We just opened another location in Houston, and it has created this very, very inclusive community of startups that are working in the clean tech sustainability area. And again, a couple of data points here. It has 2 locations now. I think we're pretty close to having 3 very soon. Over the 10-year period, 500 plus companies incubated, many, major economic impact, jobs created, and more than $4 billion in startup funding. Very impressive. But what's interesting about Greentown Labs and the other ones that I'm going to mention a little bit later, is that these are not just working, co-working spaces. These are actual very strong community of all the people that are interested in this space. So this is the wall of Greentown Labs of all their partners. And they include very large companies, they include some service organizations, they include some universities. So under one roof, there is this community that constantly rubs elbows. They have access to equipment, they have access to specialized research areas, and they are supported by large companies and a lot of the service organizations, law firms, accounting firms, software companies, all under one roof. So it is a community. It's not just a place to go work. And that's very important. The same thing goes for an organization called Lab Central, which is again, our super incubator for biotech and pharma. And again, you see that's the wall of their partner organizations. And, every single pharmaceutical company is out there. You can probably see Takeda at least very, very easily. They have the same thing, the sense of creating a entrepreneurial community, not just a place to work. We have a similar things for robotics, not as big as the other one. This is only about a 45,000 square foot facility, but again, close to 100 companies at any given time working on there. And, they are supporting the entire robotics community in the northeastern part of the United States, as well as a number of other global robotics companies from all over the world. And then finally, we have something that we call the engine, which is the MIT effort. About 5 years ago, MIT decided that there are some things that we call hard tech. There are technologies that require a lot bigger investments to be made and a lot longer gestation period for them to succeed in the marketplace. And as a result, what MIT did is to create a standalone organization, which has a component of it is a venture capital fund, which right now is managing over $750 million of funds that they invest in hard technology. Doesn't have to be MIT, it can be anywhere in the world. And they also run a 140,000 square foot incubator. Again, similar to the other three that I mentioned before, where you have equipment, you have partners, you have universities, everything under the one roof, and that makes a huge difference. So I think that this infrastructure that we have built, particularly in the last 10 years, is making a huge impact going forward. So I was asked to kind of talk a little bit about what I see as the areas that are interesting for the future. And look, this is not a very scientific analysis on my part. This is just kind of an observation of what I see as being very active in our area. And life sciences remains, again, as I mentioned before, the biggest trend and the largest area of activity. And it's across the board, everything, it's every kind of therapeutic being developed. But some of the more interesting areas are mRNA, the microbiome, particularly the gut microbiome, which is a lot of people are arguing that is going to have a huge impact on how we look at diseases, particularly neurological diseases. Synthetic biology is very, very active, particularly at the Broad Institute. Immunotherapy and artificial intelligence for diagnostics. On the material side of things, which is kind of a platform technology that impacts almost everything, lots of activities in all forms of energy storage, large and small, all sorts of different formulations, whether it is lithium ion, solid state, metal ion, you name it, all sorts of things being tried. single phase materials, particularly at MIT, and these are single phase are just these almost one-dimensional materials like graphene, which are exhibiting very, very interesting capabilities as you do things with them. There's a whole area that's called not flextronics, not twistronics, where you get the layers of single phase materials, and if you twist them, there's some interesting properties going on. Biopolymers is very active, and also artificial intelligence for materials research is very active. In the robotics space, we have a lot of warehouse robotics, logistics robotics, 3D printing, as well as drones. In cleantech, obviously, nothing surprising here, renewables, but one of the more interesting areas is industrial decarbonization. And by that, I mean a lot of activities looking at traditional industries that are incredibly high polluting industries and trying to figure out how to clean them up, whether it is making the processes less polluting, making materials that they use less polluting, materials that they produce less polluting, and so on. Circularity is a big theme that is in almost every industry, and we're seeing a lot of fascinating results out of circularity of particular industries and sectors. Green hydrogen is another example of a lot of activity. Hard to tell where it's going. In the blue tech, everything that has to do with water is big. Anything from desalinization to water treatment to, again, circularity in the blue tech and water treatment, also extremely interesting. And in agri-tech, which is something of a new field, you're seeing a lot of work in plant microbiome and also farm informatics. And just quickly, I want to show you a couple of examples of actual companies, young companies that are gathering a lot of attention in our area here. That these doesn't mean that these are the winners of the future, but very interesting companies. One of them is called Commonwealth Fusion System. It is a high temperature superconductive magnets that for small fusion reactors. And very recently, it raised $1.8 billion of investments. Another one in the agriculture side is Indigo AG, which is a plant microbiome company. Also raised about $1 billion over the years. One of the interesting things here is that this is a company that was founded by a venture fund called Flagship Pioneering, which is one of the most successful venture funds in the US. But they changed their approach to being purely an investor in startups to actually being a builder of new startups. So they built Indigo AG. Very interesting company, a lot of potential, is going through some difficult times right now. But I think it's an indication of where a lot of activity is in the agriculture side of things. Another one is a 3D printing company called Vulcan Forms. Is a laser powder bed fusion for metal 3D printing. This is, again, a very large company, that very recent, but it has a very large manufacturing capacity and is a service business. They will design and manufacturing very complex parts for anybody in different kinds of industries. MetaLens, very interesting company in the optics field. fundamentally what they have done is to introduce semiconductor manufacturing to the manufacturing of lenses. So now they can make, very inexpensive, flat, light, and very functional lenses. And the potential of metal lens really impacting the optics industry at every single layer is very high. By the way, a Harvard spin-out. And finally, something called Sublime Systems, which is a company that is trying to decarbonize and change the construction world by basically changing the way we make cement. Cement is a very, very polluting process. What Sublime System is trying to make is to change from to an electrochemical process for making cement using different materials that don't contain as much CO2. So it would impact dramatically the CO2 output of cement plants, and also create a very, very good building material, which has just recently been approved by the Department of Commerce for any kind of application. So with that, I am going to stop. If anybody would like to stay in touch in the future, here's my email address. I'm happy to connect. I understand that one of the objectives of our efforts here is to create, a better bridge between Osaka and Boston, and would be delighted to do that. So thank you again, and I'll take any questions that you might have.
はい、リバダ様、ありがとうございました。ここでですね、恐れ入ります。
Livada-san, thank you, Dr. Livada, thank you very much. Now, so following the keynote speech of Dr. Livada, I'd like to invite Mr. Nakagawa from Rhapsody Venture for a brief presentation, and then we'd like to have Q&A session. Sorry, Dr. Livada. So could you please cancel your screen? Thank you. Now, Mr. Nakagawa, once you're ready, please go ahead. Can you see my slide? Yes. So my name is Nakagawa of Blessing. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I belong to venture capital, Rhapsody Venture Capital. So this is like a contact point between Japan and the Boston area. Today, I'd like to talk about what Rhapsody Venture Capital is doing. And actually, thanks to Dr. Livada, we are invited to give a short presentation about Rhapsody Venture. So what we are doing in Japan, and also what they are doing both in Japan and the US. Rhapsody Venture Partners is based in Cambridge, Boston, as one of the greater Boston area. And they have an asset of $200 million. I believe that this is very unique fund. So hard tech, or so-called tough tech. So this company only focuses on investing to hard tech or tough tech. So there are 8 members. The number is not so big or rather small. A venture capital is operated with these members. All the members are from MIT or Harvard and so on. They have a technical background. The destination of investment includes these areas. as you can see here, the hard tech and the tough tech companies, as Dr. Livada mentioned, material science, energy storage, package. So these are destination of our investment. Such hard tech startups are facing a lot of challenges. Namely, I think there are two types of challenges. One is the capital. So Rhapsody, we as venture capital is investing startups, but more than that, partner is also very important key for them. So startups companies are spin-off of university. That means they don't have so many customers, and also they don't have opportunities for POC. Based on these challenges, we try to provide opportunity of POC or introduce customers or give advice about how to commercialize their business. And also we are giving advice to how to start mass production and so on. So we are definitely requiring your support from Japan. To this end, we have many programs. This slide shows one of the programs. So this is what we call innovation bridge, connecting between large company and startups. We are here to fill the gap between these two stakeholders, not only investing money, we also focus on finding a partner, finding appropriate partner for them. This slide shows a tool we are using. We have this kind of database. Now, more than 9,000 companies. So destination of our investment or possible destination of our investment are listed here. So hard tech and tough tech companies are included in such a database. For Japanese large companies, not only US, but globally, I believe that this database gives you a good data for possible partnership. Now, 15 Japanese large companies are helping us finding appropriate partner for startups. This is the last page. My own company is called Blessing, based in Minato Ward, Tokyo. If you have any interest in our activity or business, so please contact us. So I believe that I will definitely support you. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Mr. Nakagawa, thank you very much. So Dr. Livada and Mr. Nakagawa, we received some questions, so we'd like to ask questions. First, question to Dr. Livada. The question goes, as the center of innovation, Silicon Valley is often the well heard of, and Boston. But what is the difference between the Silicon Valley and Boston? What is the uniqueness of Silicon Valley and Boston? And what is the relationship between Silicon Valley and Boston in terms of innovation? Dr. Livada, could you answer this question?
I'm going to try. It's always a good question. Look, first of all, Silicon Valley and Boston are two different areas, obviously geographically. We in Boston always think that we built Silicon Valley because it all started here and then moved west, but never mind that. In Silicon Valley, what you have is a it's actually a much larger community of venture capital, but also a very strong emphasis on software and on microelectronics and so on. So it's a huge community. It's bigger than the community in Boston. We tend to think that our community here is smaller but much more diverse, that we cover a lot of different areas, and we have more of a, you know, a lead on pharmaceuticals and medical devices and stuff like that. But really, you know, they're just two areas. They're similar in terms of the objectives that the areas have of creating new technology, of supporting startups and innovation, of collaborating between all sorts of groups. One of the other things that we talk a lot in the Boston area is that what you have to, if you want to compare kind of two areas that are very similar, you have to think of Silicon Valley and the West Coast of California, with Boston and New York as a combined area. And really, it's really, you know, Boston is not alone in the Northeast here. You know, our next door neighbor, New York has an enormous amount of capital, as well as a very vibrant entrepreneurial network. And we do a lot of work as part of the entire Northeast. But you know, there's no competition. There's very little collaboration. One of the things that we worry about in Boston is that some of our startups, as they grow, they go to different parts of the country to grow even larger. And that has been kind of a tradition here, that we start them and then they evolve in other areas. It's a little bit of a concern on our side, but basically we think of ourselves as the startup entrepreneurs. But things are changing. What we also see is that, particularly as it comes to relationship with Japan and Japanese companies and so on, you obviously have a much stronger position on the West Coast for obvious reasons. And for many years, Boston was kind of considered kind of a faraway place for Japanese companies. But in the last 5 years, I would say, we've seen a significant increase in the activity level of Japanese companies and presence in the Boston area.
ありがとうございます。最後に日本企業のお話が出てきましたが、
Thank you very much. You mentioned Japanese companies. This would be related questions. So I believe that there are many collaboration examples between Japanese company and Boston ecosystem. I think that one of the good example is CVC of Mitsubishi. So I wonder whether we should base in Boston to collect information, or are there any other collaboration style? And also, going forward, so what kind of things are expected there in Boston going forward?
I'm not certain that I understand the entire question, but let me start, and then if I miss anything, please let me know and I'll go back. But what we're seeing, as I mentioned before, is that there is an increased level of activities from Japanese companies, especially in the last 2 years, let's say, post-COVID, because COVID really slowed down a lot of the interactions between Japan, actually the entire world, you know. But now suddenly there's a lot of activity. So, for example, Mitsubishi, both Mitsubishi Corp and Mitsubishi Electric and Mitsubishi Chemicals are all very active in the Boston area with you know, for example, Mitsubishi Electric has an innovation center that is a very vibrant center. doing some really interesting research in various areas. Mitsubishi Corp has more of a representation in more like technology scouting, trying to understand what's going on in the northeastern part of the country here, in a lot of different areas, because, it's a very large corporation with interest in industrial and materials and sustainability and so on. Hitachi Ventures is very active. And by the way, there is no single model for of what it takes to have a presence in the Boston area. Some folks, some organizations have individuals or small offices that are here to just scout and get close to the areas that are interesting. Some of them have investment arms, venture capital, but that's not required. A lot of them have representatives of the research and development organizations of these companies that are looking for opportunities for co-development. So it's a gamut of activities, and it depends what you're looking for and what to achieve by having a more active presence here in Boston. But the bottom line is, it's an incredibly rich community for emerging technology, and it's worth being connected to it. Did I miss anything in that question?
はい、お答えいただけていると思います。ありがとうございます。
Yes, thank you very much.
また関連したご質問で、今度はかなり具体的な
Related question, more specific question.
自分はスタートアップの経営者ですと。
I am the owner of the startup. As a startup owner or founder, if I join this ecosystem and experience their diverse research activities, if I want to do that, what is the first thing that I should do? Who to contact, and how should what can I involve? How can I enter into this ecosystem? That is the question.
Sure, absolutely. Look, first of all, we love to have entrepreneurs from around the world be connected to our community in one way or another. We have a lot of different activities that help entrepreneurs, whether they be from Europe or Japan or South America, that are interested in the U.S. marketplace or connection to the research institute, in helping you make those connections. So there are programs, there are organizations, for example, we have an organization here that's called the Mass Innovation Network. The Mass Innovation Network has a program for global entrepreneurs. It provides a lot of the information and materials that you need to know about the U.S. marketplace, whether that's questions of legal, accounting, setting up offices, real estate, anything at all. We have programs that are readily available, so you better understand what's going on here and how to connect. And then there are a large number of people with deep experience in startups that are very useful in helping you establish some sort of a presence. It doesn't have to be a large presence. It can be, they can be agents for you that start the initial connection. It can be people that can help one or two of your colleagues that want to spend, whether it's 6 months or 2 years here in the States, to better understand the situation here and make the connections. It's all very, very, all the support is available. And by the way, if you need any kind of support, just drop me an email and I'll connect you with the right people. I work a lot with You know, frankly, I'll tell you, we see a lot of European traffic from entrepreneurial European startups. We haven't seen a lot of Japanese. Would love to see some more, and there are a lot of support systems for that.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you so much. We have received other questions, but because of the time constraints, we'd like to conclude this part of the presentation program. Thank you very much. Dr. Livada, thank you so much for your time and the great presentation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and I hope that you got some understanding of what we have here, and I hope that we have more opportunities to dig deeper into it and connect better. So thank you very much.